Hello, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Dario. I'm the chairman of Next Pharma Summit. Today we are doing our new webinar. Very interesting topic indeed. Is patient engagement on hold? So we are having some pretty interesting speakers. So from the left of the screen, as you can see, we have Daniel from Janssen. We have Andy Bowman from Vantage, Kathleen Tighe from Sanofi Genzyme, Liz Clark from Norgine, and Gabriella Salvatore as moderator from Vantage Partners. So really great pleasure and honor to welcome you all. And I would like to pass the microphone and stage to Gabriella. So please, Gabriella, the floor is yours. You can moderate this pretty amazing webinar. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Dario, and hello to everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you are. So we would like to kick off this webinar with having each of our panelists just introduce themselves quickly and to have them answer the question, is patient engagement on hold given where we are currently with COVID-19 across the globe? So Daniel, can we start with you? Just a quick introduction and your opinion about patient engagement being on hold.
Sure, Daniel de Schryver. I'm leading the patient engagement and advocacy work here for Janssen in Europe, Middle East, and Africa, but I'm part of the global leadership team at Janssen, where our decision has been made that patient engagement is everybody's responsibility. So we don't have a specific department for it. We are changing the way we operate. And I think that changing the way we operate answers the question, is patient engagement on hold? No, we've been doing huge efforts to change the way we are coming with solutions. We're coming with solutions not anymore for patients, we're trying to develop them with patients. That's a huge undertaking that has asked for a lot of investment also in change management and in people's mentality and way they work. And this is ongoing. I would even say almost more important today with the problems people are facing due to COVID-19, more important than ever. So it's not on hold, it is ongoing.
Great, wonderful, thank you so much. Kate, would you mind doing the same?
Sure, although it's a little hard to follow Daniel when he gives such a great answer. So I'm Kate, I'm head of our US team for patient advocacy and rare diseases here at Sanofi Genzyme. I, much like Daniel, don't think patient engagement is on hold. I'm assuming all of us don't, which is why we are here. I think it's become a lot more purposeful and intentional, and at the moment a bit driven on a particular agenda topic, but really thinking more about solutions and coming up with sort of a long-range plan for engagement. So absolutely not on hold, and really happy to be here today to be talking about it.
Wonderful, thank you so much. And Liz.
Hi, I'm Liz Clark. I'm Vice President of Medical Affairs at Norgine, and I lead Norgine's patient engagement work. No, I don't think patient engagement is on hold any more than any other aspect of our business is on hold at the moment. I do think COVID-19 has created an interesting environment with very different demands on us, on patients and the entire healthcare community, and that's why it's more important than ever that we ensure that we continue to engage with patients throughout this time.
Great, thank you so much. So Daniel, let me come to you. You talked about changing the way you're doing business, creating medicines with patients, not for patients. As you think about this question of patient engagement, what do you see as industry's role and responsibility in connecting people in today's environment?
Well, and I hope that today's environment is not limited to COVID, but is broader. Our responsibility is we are part of a huge number of stakeholders that have an impact in healthcare. And I think what we all want is to increase or to come up with better health outcomes. Patients want better health outcomes for themselves and their partners and the people around them. Health authorities want better health outcomes because you want to invest and have some return for your investment. And as a business model, the industry can thrive on bringing better health outcomes. It makes sense. So I think our role is to connect the people who are going to use it into the whole process of discovery, development, coming to market, bringing solutions, because the people who are needing it and are using it are the key elements to achieve health outcomes. You cannot have a health outcome if your patient is not empowered, if the person who is using the solution is not a person who does it because he or she knows what it brings to him or her. So again, our role is to ensure that what we come up with fits the patient, so tailor-made if possible, so that of course the usage will be better and everybody wins. Health authorities win, we win, society wins.
Great. So I want to pick up on this connecting people by including patients in discovery, development, and research. I imagine clinical trials. Kate, can you say a little bit about how the work at Sanofi is coming along in doing that, connecting people in, connecting patients into the full end-to-end cycle of drug development?
Sure. One of the things I'm really proud of at Sanofi is that the patient voice happens long before an asset moves into the clinic. So there are interviews that happen with bench scientists and patients to really understand what the patient is communicating as their unmet need, and to try to determine if that asset really has the ability to be impactful and meaningful. And so, I think the fact that our science team and our R&D team is just as interested in the patient voice as our marketing team on a commercial product is really important. And I think, to Daniel's point, it's about developing solutions that really meet a patient need. We're certainly in an era where there are plenty of Me Too drugs, and I don't think anyone's looking for another insulin product or another product to manage a condition that already has 3 or 4 choices for patients. And so it's really about identifying what the right unmet need is and trying to pair it with the right asset. And I think at Sanofi, it's really important to us. I know that we're not unique in doing that, that there are lots of companies that do it, but I certainly look at it as a best practice. And I think it can result in changes to protocols, to visits, to procedures performed, and to amendments once the study is started to make it a better experience for patients. And in the time of COVID, as a friend of mine said yesterday, ISO life, and I told her I'd be borrowing that. I thought that was a great way to think of it. I think that the needs that patients are expressing about going to clinic and the burden of clinic visits, particularly for clinical trials, is being heard more clearly. I don't think that that's a new unmet need. I think most patients would say, yeah, it's really challenging to get to clinic every other week. I have 3 kids, I have a job, I have to travel, particularly for rare disease patients. They might be dealing with physical and ability challenges that make it even more difficult for them to navigate an airport or a train station. And so I think there's a real opportunity to listen more clearly and to take that feedback to make clinical trials and research easier for patients, because there seems to be right now such an appetite for telemedicine or a hub and spoke clinical model. I think in the US, our regulators seem to be amenable to it. And we were on a call yesterday with a bunch of pharma industry and advocate partners talking about how do we make this momentary reality a permanent reality to make research better for patients. Certainly my hope.
That's great. Thank you. Liz,
Yeah.
as you think about this question from the Med Affairs perspective, how do you see industry's role, particularly from the medical affairs point of view?
I don't think it matters where you sit within industry.
Liz, it's a little hard. It's a little hard to hear you. Are you close to the microphone?
Yeah, I'm close to the microphone.
That's much better, much better.
Yeah, okay. I don't think it matters where you sit within industry. I think it's about having awareness of the patient right from the start and carrying that in your mind, whatever you're doing. So Kate was talking about bench scientists understanding patients' needs. That goes the whole way through to the post-marketing space.
Mm-hmm.
And I think this is about us keeping the patient in mind, but keeping the patient in mind as a person who has challenges, some of them to do with their illness and some of them to do with logistic challenges. Kate also mentioned getting to clinic and stuff like that. And in this situation, it's about doing the things that we believe from our understanding will be valuable. So this visual that I've got, it comes from a guy called Julian Stott, who does quite a lot of deep thinking and is doing some really great work about the social age at the moment. But it's about the impact that we have is, yes, based on our intention and transmitted through our actions, but that needs to be informed by having truly listened to what patients need and to continue that checking in process. So if you move that on to the next, it's saying that actually the impact that we have through the actions that we do determines culture. And culture, to Daniel's point, is more than intention, and it's not about corporate core values either. It's actually about what we do. So in the medical affairs space, I'm very focused on thinking about the things that we do to make sure that we can align and co-create with patients, rather than having good intentions that we enact, but which don't actually have the impact that we want because they don't hit the mark for the patients. And I think if we get that alignment and that alignment with the patient community, then we can actually transform the culture of our broader companies and everybody within the company, so that then becomes the way that we do things. And we've engaged a lot with expert patients to do that. And when I'm explaining this philosophy, I actually use the phrase triple win, which has come from a program on joint working that's been sanctioned by the ABPI, which is our industry association. The great thing about it is that it openly recognises that all stakeholders should win, and that includes industry, because I think sometimes we're a little bit shy about the fact that we make profit when we need to make profit in order to remain viable. So the benefits, which are shown on the next slide, are the patient, the health service, and the company. And I find the concept of talking about a triple win is helpful in starting to develop relationships where we can get some true co-creation, and that involves co-creating with patients to do the things that are going to benefit those three stakeholders.
Daniel, I see you shaking your head yes. Would you like to add on?
Yes, I think honestly, I wanted to do two things. First, a very concrete example of what Liz was saying. We had a clinical trial that we developed for people with retinal problems, so people who have problems seeing. And we organized transport because our intention was very good. We organized transport to the hospitals, and we had problems recruiting, and we went back to patients and said, why? Could you please explain? We thought we had thought on everything. And they said, well, if you drop us in front of the hospital, we're still as blind, we can't see where we have to go. So the transport is not going to solve, it has no impact. Your impact needs to be, bring me to the place where the trial is going to happen, bring me to the doctor. It's a very concrete, simple, and one would say also low-hanging fruit, but you cannot live on your intention only. You have to do this with patients. Again, for me, it was a key proof point of doing it with. And then I think your triple win is exactly also what I said. I think in this complex environment of health, there are many stakeholders, and there is no competitive problem. It's not like the one or the other. It's only you can win if everybody wins. And of course, the key person to win is the patient. If the patient doesn't win, yeah, I mean, sorry, if people are dying, I don't see the success of the NHS and no success of any company. So basically, patient is key and should have an influence on all of them, because if it's not circled around what the patient really needs, then it's not serving the citizens, because of course every patient is just one citizen who happens to live with a condition.
Yeah, I think there's an irony with this program. And I think it's great and it provides a structure, but it doesn't involve the patient in the co-creation, and that to me is the Achilles heel. We need to make sure we bring the patient in with the company.
Yeah.
Kate, your thoughts on the triple win concept, and particularly, not to put you on the spot, but particularly as the sole American on the panel, in a very different kind of healthcare system than the ones that Daniel and Liz are describing.
Sure. Gabriella, you know I don't mind a little controversy. It's the lone American. You know, I think in general, my response to the triple win is I really appreciate the freshness and the honesty of it. And I think, Liz, to your point, we shouldn't be so shy about the fact that companies make money and we're a profitable industry. I think a lot about the statement you make about values. Your values are at the heart of what you do, and they're informed by your intentions and your actions. And I come back every time I think about it to the idea that, yes, patients are people, but we are also patients. And so I think there is a danger in othering the patient. And Daniel, when you were giving the example of the blind patient saying, well, being dropped in front doesn't really help me, I was thinking about another company that worked in the retinal space, Spark, and an example I heard them give about how they built a fake city for their clinical teams to go through blindfolded and to really understand the impact of what it would be to be that person, and then go back and think about the study and think about what they wanted it to look like. And I always hold on to that example because I think it's really important to not separate ourselves as the drug developer from the physician who treats the patient from the patient, because someday that could be you, that could be your parent, that could be your child. The patient isn't any different than we are. And so, Liz, I really love the triple win concept because I think that it gives you an opportunity to say, where am I in this? This is driven by me. Where am I in this? You know, I think in the US, COVID in a way has been a bit of a blessing for the pharmaceutical industry's reputation. I'm a little worried saying that because I'm sure this is being recorded. But I think that there has been an acceptance of the role that private industry has played in COVID for response, for better or for worse, in the country, and to a certain extent in keeping patient groups alive with grants and sponsorships, with supporting emergency asks for premium assistance funds and cost of living assistance funds to help people pay rent, pay utility bills. And I think there's an acceptance that none of that would have been possible or would be possible if the pharmaceutical industry didn't make money. I heard a woman from Merck very early on, she had worked on the Ebola virus vaccine, and she said, you know, we need to remember this moment when it comes back to why are drugs so expensive? Why do you make so much money? We need to remember that in this moment, it's private companies that are working on a vaccine and devoting their resources to this. And so I think about that a lot, that how do you balance the honesty about being a for-profit company with the good work that we do, whether that's bringing treatments to rare patients, trying to understand the needs of a blind patient to make the trial experience better for them, whether it's supporting organizations that help with advocacy and access and affordability. There's a lot of good that we do with the money that we earn. And so I think it's important to be honest about it. And Liz, I love that you're just so right there with it, that yep, we make money, but here are the ways that we all benefit together from that. And so I appreciate it a lot.
Which in Europe, I would say, as one element to it, that actually the US has it too, but it's in a different way because it's private insurances. But the people who pay for the costs will not pay for it if it has no outcome. So I come back to that outcome word. So our success is linked to how good we are to provide health outcomes. If we're not bringing health, we're not selling a product, we're selling health improvement. And you get paid for health improvement. People who think you get paid for pills, that is not true. That is the medium through which, sorry, we bring health outcomes. But we are rewarded for health outcomes.
Yeah, Daniel, I think in the US, we're starting to see that same pressure. You know, whether it's an ICER review that's assigning a value, or whether it's an insurance plan saying we already have 4 drugs that do this and yours is either better or we're not going to cover it. Or, you know, I think yes, we have a private system, but there is very much an acceptance and a reality check coming of we can't just pay for everything. There are a vast number of people who are on Medicare and Medicaid, which are federally supported programs and state supported programs. And even the private insurances are saying we simply cannot pay a high price tag for every drug for every patient. It breaks the system. And so I think for those of us thinking about engagement and whether it's really on hold, I think you need to truly understand the unmet need and also understand, I think, what patients are willing to do to advocate for that product and access to that product, or else to your point, Liz, and Daniel, it becomes irrelevant and the company fails and the patient fails and the health services don't pay for it, and all that money and time you spent on developing is worthless.
So let's pivot for a minute and talk a little bit about the patient communities that you are each involved with, and how you see those communities adapting to so much less face-to-face, if any, at this point in time. And this generally and historically are communities that connect together in person, and you hear patients and family members talk about the value of that connection. So what are you seeing in the communities? How are patients staying engaged with their own communities, not even just with industry? Daniel, you want to start us off?
Well, somebody on the panel, and I won't mention that person, said we should have bought stock in Zoom, and I think that basically is one of the answers. We underestimate the organizations, or we have tendency to think, oh, how are they coping? But they're organized. They are organized as we are, and they are sitting as we are now here, connected through web-based solutions. There are plenty of them. Of course, I mean, honestly, I must applaud them because they are also facing with work at home, most of them, and juggling the household plus the work in the same place, and then having to do much more to keep the people connected. So I applaud all these volunteers who are working really day and night to keep it going. But I see a lot of positive happening. I see people doing a lot of efforts to keep that connection, and maybe, and that's the weird side, to be honest, having even more, not the ones who are in the organizations, but the patients as individuals, more tendency to connect, because they are disconnected because you're blocked at home, and say, oh, well, actually I have this community that I can rely on. So from a community building, I see a lot happening. In some countries, of course, Canada, the US mainly, but not only, where a lot of fundraising is done in public spaces. For these organizations, that's a hard nut to crack because there is no public space. So that will be a difficult year for them when it comes to income. But then when it comes to connecting, they're very good. And when it comes to connecting with us, that's the same thing as patient engagement. As I said in the beginning, we've gone far from, they are gone far from building their capacity, studying how can they influence clinical trials. All this knowledge is there. They are not going to now park it and say, oh, that was it's a gone by period. They will want, ask, and if not even demand to be able to use that knowledge and to use it for the better. So that engagement is definitely in a crucial moment now, but I see them surviving the problems better than we think.
So Daniel, you just gave us sort of 3 categories of engagement: the community engagement with itself, community engagement with industry, and then fundraising as an engagement activity. So as you think about these 3, Kate, what are you seeing? We have people on this panel who represent primary care, specialty care, and for you, rare diseases. How is it similar or different in the rare disease space, and what are you seeing across these 3 categories?
Sure. I'm lucky on my team within public affairs. I sit with our vaccines colleagues, our specialty care, primary care, diabetes, oncology. What I think about is a rare mom said to me, Kate, this is always our life. We're always isolated. We're afraid of an infection all the time. And it's nice to see people connecting with each other over Zoom or making an effort to be connected, because we hope that type of engagement continues. Daniel, I wrote down 2 things when you were talking. I think it's for our our patient communities, they now have two missions. They have their regular mission, which is whatever disease advocacy they're working on or education they're trying to do. And now they have to respond to COVID as well. And I think I am beyond impressed with the way that organizations, big and small, have immediately jumped in and come up with solutions. Their access to physicians and medical education for the communities, I think, is unparalleled and impressive. And we on the industry side, I think, Daniel, you said we discount it a lot of how influential and impactful and important the organizations are. And I think to the overarching question of is engagement on hold, I think more than ever, companies are relying on patient engagement to understand what the needs are. You know, what are you hearing? Are they able to access treatment? What's happening with access to their physician? What are they saying about the clinical trial? Those are questions that come to my email inbox every day. And that reliance on the connection to the patient community and the engagement with the patient community is what's driving business decisions. And so I think about that rare mom of this is our everyday, and I hope this becomes our everyday. This becomes the way we engage. I'm impressed with the way that groups have delivered, but I think I'd be remiss to not say that fundraising wise, this is really, really challenging, and there will be organizations that don't make it. I think it's the organizations that are planning for the future that are saying our engagement can't just be around COVID. We need to find a new way to be relevant. I think those organizations are the ones that will adapt. So the ones that usually deliver a summer camp, can't have camp, but they're doing a virtual program, or they're doing, instead of a family conference, they're going to do a scientific conference, but with breakout chat rooms for people to connect. Some of my groups are mailing little goodie bags of popcorn and t-shirts and doing photo challenges. The groups that rise to the occasion will be the ones who make it. And I think the groups that stay and continue to engage the way they always have will be the ones who don't. And maybe to your point, Liz, about the triple win, that the groups that can see the way that their purpose and their actions will drive success, maybe those will be what we look back and say, well, yes, those are the groups that made it because they really were able to change and adapt. So I'm not sure if that answers your question, but you know, I'm an American. When I have thoughts, I need to share them.
Yes.
Yeah, but I really do see a shift in groups, some that have surprised me, and some that I look at and think, oh gosh, that's going to really be problematic. And those are groups not just in the rare space. So it's leveled the playing field, if you will.
Let me just remind our attendees that if you have questions for the panelists, you can please chat those in and we'll be sure to answer them and keep them coming. So thank you for that. Liz, Kate was mentioning the adaptations she's seeing in the community groups that she supports. Can you talk a little bit about the kind of adaptations you're seeing in the community groups that you support?
I think for me, actually, I do less work with patient groups and I'm more focused on
Liz, you're a little bit far away from the mic, or there's a lot of feedback.
I think there must be a lot of feedback because I'm close to the mic. How's that? Any better?
Now that's perfect.
Okay, I'll be still. So I do less work with patient groups and more work with individual patients. But on the individual patient basis, I think there has been a shift over time as technology has enabled patients to communicate differently and break through boundaries. As Kate was saying, some people in this environment, which is really amplifying that behaviour, is causing a bit of a potential for some evolution and survival in that space.
You know what, Liz? It's very difficult to understand what you're saying. I think what I hear you saying is that technology has been a big adaptation. Was there another category of things that were an adaptation?
Social media, the technology provides the structure and the tools, and people, the adopters, have started to use that technology.
Got it.
But now other people, the threshold they needed to make it worthwhile has gone down with COVID. And so more people are starting to venture into that space. And it's a space that is really opening up communication and breaking down boundaries across the traditional arena, whether that's about communication on Twitter, communication via other social media. All of these things were starting to happen and had happened with early adopters. I think we'll come out of this seeing that they are much more normal for many more people.
Such an interesting point that pre-COVID, we might have thought about technology as separating us. And now during COVID, we're thinking of technology as connecting us. And so I wonder, Daniel, if you want to speak a little bit about the role of empathy and how we're communicating empathy across these technological platforms. So much of your work is based in that concept.
Yes, I think it's a very interesting and complex question, and I'll come back to I think Kate saying we build a city to help our own employees to understand what it is to have sight problems, and we have similar things even for healthcare professionals to explain what schizophrenia feels like, or pulmonary arterial hypertension. What does it mean when you walk the street, when you have that? Those things we understand, and that it helps to be more empathic, because of course you see somebody who you see as an individual like you, but you cannot understand what is that person feeling, how is that person coping with the world, and it may be difficult. So that one thing is the first thing. The second thing is, and that's your question, how do you transmit that empathy when you're not even close to that person? That's a big take and not easy. And we've tried now to help our colleagues because we are talking patient engagement, but it's a problem for everyone. I've worked remotely since probably 2002 because I've always worked with international teams, and I was sitting somewhere but not with the team, and I've worked in a home-based office for more than 12 or 13 years, so I'm used to do this type of conversations with my team. Now imagine if you're in an operating company somewhere, you're in Italy, and you normally go and see patient representatives, you're discussing with them, then you come back to the office and you meet with your colleagues, and now suddenly you're isolated and you have to do that and you cope with. So I don't have a one-size-fits-all solution. And what I'm saying is that type of problem is just now becoming universal. We're trying to have human resources help us with some coaching on how do you even keep a team together when they're not together anymore. It's it's new. I'm not saying uncharted territory, because honestly, many people have worked remotely, but it's new and not everybody adapts as easily to it. So that's not easy. I think you cannot now say, oh, I'm picking up the phone, I'm going to Zoom, and I'll show you how much empathy I have. Patient engagement is a long-term activity. It's built on trust. And trust is something you cannot win in one day. It is trust. So I always tell my colleagues, you know what? You would trust your neighbor potentially more because you see him every day than you would trust that far uncle that you only see at the Christmas party, because you don't really know him. And that is it. You have to be sure that you understand people more on a daily business, not just go and see patients. No, I need something because I'm having a hurdle. Can you help me? No. It's an ongoing dialogue. That ongoing dialogue, if it has been there before, they can continue on Zoom. If I need to learn to know people and I've never worked with them, and now I'm from one moment to another appearing on their screen, that's going to be a hard thing to achieve. But if it's part of a continuum, yeah, it's just technology, and we'll manage.
Yeah. So Kate, I saw you shaking your head or nodding your head. Did you want to add?
Yeah, Daniel, I at first was smiling. You've been training for this for the past 18 years. You're ready, or 8 years, you're ready to do it. So I think you
I have a headache of these earphones that I'm wearing since so long. That's what you mean.
You know, when you were talking about trust and empathy, Gabriella, I was thinking about that related to patient engagement. And I think you closed with that, Daniel, right? It's, you can't have been a stranger and now decide that you want to be present on a Zoom screen. And I think the learning on the engagement side is that it has to be really purpose driven. And the best investment that you can make right now is to listen to the patient community and to their needs. I think unmet needs are more exposed now than ever. And patients probably have been communicating those unmet needs as long as Daniel has been working from home, but we may not have heard them as clearly or been as motivated to act on them, even if it was uncomfortable or uneasy for us. I think empathy for me, when I think about it as engaging with patients, is listening and coming up with a solution that serves the patient, not me. And in doing that, we build trust in the relationship, that if their need right now really is, Kate, we really need money to keep the lights on, or our patients are really struggling to put food on the table and we want to have an assistance fund, I don't get a tangible check the box benefit other than doing the right thing for a patient community or being a leader, but I'm being empathetic to their needs and listening and trying to respond in a way that I can, which builds trust in our relationship. And so I really think there's an opportunity to engage more frequently. It's easier in some ways to engage. It's more challenging because it's not as satisfying or authentic as being there with someone to have a cup of coffee or have a hug or laugh or cry. If you're in rare, you cry a lot. And there's empathy in that. But there are ways if you're committed to it. And so as we think about patient engagement, I would say back to the original question of like, what do you want your values to be? I, as an advocate, want my values to be that we're an empathetic company that is worth trusting with your health, and that we want to listen and solve an unmet need for you, whether that's a product that we're developing, a product we've developed, or something that just helps your community, because we want to engage, not take.
So Liz, Kate mentioned that some of what she thinks has occurred over the last bit of time here with the COVID situation is becoming more purpose-driven and listening for unmet needs that may have always been there, but there's such greater amounts of listening going on. Those sound like things that we might want to bring into the future when we're done with this COVID situation. Are there other things that you're learning or observing, Liz, in your work at Norgine that are coming out of this situation that you're changing and adapting yourself, but that you might want to keep for the future?
That's a really good question. For me, I simply see different challenges and an amplification of what's already there. So having understanding of the challenges of people who are very vulnerable in the COVID-19 sense, and understanding what that means to them on a daily basis, and the challenges that they're facing, the extent to which they're amplified is also matched by the extent to which they are managing those with a huge amount of resourcefulness. And so I just tend to see an amplification of what's already there. And the other thing that I hear reflected back perhaps is the fact that the COVID-19 situation is causing people to have more gratitude, sometimes for the simple things and sometimes for the things that they've taken for granted. And I think healthcare and medicines rank heavily within that. And so where we've kept manufacturing plants running as normal and so on, we've had appreciation from our patient community that we're doing that for them, and that is a two-way thing, and that's really important. So I think closing that loop of gratitude and appreciation both ways has perhaps caused us to value it more when previously we took quite a lot for granted.
Thank you. So we're coming in towards the end of our hour, and I'm going to ask each of our panelists to put on their their magic hats and think about the future and a little bit of prediction for our participants. When you think about the lasting implications of this time in quarantine for how we engage with patients, what are a few practical, pragmatic pieces of advice you might have? What you've learned, how you're going to take it forward, and what can people do who are sitting at home right now, who are in patient advocacy or patient engagement roles in their businesses? What advice would you have for them about learning from this experience and taking forward some really important and different and/or important and similar pathways to engaging patients? Daniel, you want to start us off?
The difficult part of your question is the pragmatic, because does it mean, as long as it's not practical, because that probably would bring us to too much details. I think I'm a strong believer of patient engagement, and I think the change that we have seen within patients and their representatives in getting up to speed to understand science and to be able to influence science, it's a given. We're there. And I think what happens now is that COVID and the isolation and the problems that our society is facing due to that virus is showing that healthcare system is consisting of many little factors. And the industry and the patients have worked together, have been engaged, but sort of, yes, we'll do that because that helps us to push science forward, and it helps us to come to better outcomes, but it's sort of like out of that complete group of stakeholders. Like, we do this on one side. In Europe paradigm, it's an IMI project, is working on setting up a set of tools and a sort of new paradigm. What should patient engagement in the future look like? That is a work that has now been ongoing for 2 years almost, so it didn't start with COVID. What I want to say is that now that we see that this healthcare system is fragile, I think what we can come out of it is that we do this in an even more open way. That we've all been transparent, we're always doing this, but we should now, for the big public, for the big audience, for the public in general, just make it clear that there is no good future healthcare if it's not happening with patient engagement. So for me, this is a key moment in the engagement. It's going to show it to the face of everyone that this is a vital element. So what I see happening is more of it, and technology will help us to do the things we've done before in just a little bit different ways, because we'll need to be a little bit more virtual, less face-to-face. But so for me, it's what we already seen happening. It will happen more. It will happen more openly because everybody will recognize the need of it. And it will be more clear that between industry and patients, there need to be this connection in order to make healthcare better. So not something that is a nice to have, but something that is essential.
So just wonderful. Thank you, Daniel. And we have a question from Nick Hicks in our audience, which I want to get in here. How are both sides of the Atlantic managing the 100% emphasis of COVID on healthcare policy? And how will PAGs get their own disease agenda back on the radar screen, which I think is a really interesting question. So how do PAGs get their own disease agenda back on the radar screen? Kate, thoughts about that?
Nick, that's a $1 million question. So way to throw it in at the end, Gabriella. I think what we see on our side of the Atlantic in the US, I don't know what side you're on, Nick, is that the patient organizations certainly are focusing their advocacy on COVID, right? This is, for us, it's about access and rare. We're thinking a lot about Medicare patients who want to be able to be infused at home, and clinical trial. Will the regulators be flexible? I mean, we're certainly thinking, yes, COVID related. The organizations that I see succeeding are the ones tying COVID to their disease at the moment. So I'll take the Pompe community, which is a neuromuscular disease that can have real impact on the lungs and breathing. They're talking about ventilator guidelines for COVID and all the time. I saw a physician present on telemedicine pros and cons, but how he'll use that to treat and diagnose Pompe disease. those organizations who are putting their disease in the COVID conversations are the ones who I think will be able to assert it again. There is a real worry. How do you pivot? How do you come back from the COVID conversation to talk about anything else? And I think it's accepting a reality that for us, budgets will be really tight, state budgets will be really low. They're not going to be interested in new programs, new diagnostic efforts. So the ones who are thinking about that now, how do I make sure my disease stays relevant? I think those will be the ones who have something to say about their disease at the end of it.
Great. Thank you for that. Also, from a question from the audience about whether this webinar is being recorded. It is being recorded and it will be posted. So please know that you'll be able to return back to it. And then another question from our audience about what your opinions are on the emotional burden of disease that the isolation of COVID-19 is that being seen as an important element for the regulatory and HTA processes, the social isolation that's happening, the emotional burden of that. Liz, from a medical affairs perspective, do you want to speak to this question first?
Yeah, I think in terms of HTA processes and so on, it's not about what's happening now, but perhaps about that being something which is considered more in future. I think we're in quite early days about really fully understanding the emotional well-being burden of COVID-19 for the whole population, and understanding how that is amplified either through disease immediately or as a result of the need for greater isolation for patients, anxieties about accessing treatment, anxieties about contracting COVID-19, and balancing that risk benefit. And I think this experience will frame the way we think about things for some time to come. But I'm not particularly optimistic that that is going to cause health technology assessment to suddenly take those secondary arenas on board in a particularly quantitative way.
So, you know, in the US, Gabriella, there's an effort underway by an organization called the Every Life Foundation for Rare Diseases to actually quantify the cost of living with a rare disease. So they're focusing on some ICD-10 codes, which are sort of the way our insurers bill, so that we can track actually the cost of those diseases, both from private insurance as well as Medicare patients. But they're layering onto that a social survey that is open to all rare disease patients, talking about time missed from work, educational challenges, either not achieving the level of education you wanted as a patient, as a parent, the cost of your educational program that you have to have, the social burden. Do you not get to go to a birthday party because you're in a wheelchair and the house has stairs? And what are the social occasions that you've missed? And to try to package that together to say there is a psychological cost and there is a dollar cost of living with a chronic health condition, and to present it to regulators as an actual cost. And so I really applaud them for, and I'm happy that Sanofi is a sponsor of the work, along with a number of other companies in this space, because it's important to have data to get a regulatory authority to consider the social impact. I think Liz's point is well made, that we're talking about it a lot more. There are so many more webinars about staying connected and taking care of your mental health. There's a bigger awareness of it. I think to translate that to a reimbursement or a label addition, you have to have data. And so I really think that that work began before COVID, but will be even more important after.
Yeah. So in our last few minutes, we have another question from an audience member, Richie Castles, who's wondering what role can industry play in ensuring the patient voice is heard in the potentially significant redesign of health services in the post-COVID world? Really good question. Daniel?
What we want to see is an empowered patient. again, I think we will be successful if the patient is empowered to understand and have developed a solution that fits what he needs. And so if we have been working now for years to achieve that, that's a long-term achievement, so it's not happening one day or the other. I think what we are doing, because we are working towards that same aim and we are helping patients to be more empowered, we're also helping them to be more empowered to achieve changes in policy. We're not pushing them. We are just saying, because you're involved and you understand how the things work, well, then it's up to you. You're a citizen, as we all are, and you need to fight for a better system. Whatever that change means, every country has its own issues. Nobody has a perfect system, I think. But if we, just because we are both in a win-win, and that's a triple win that Liz says, but we were in a win-win relations. If we bring better health outcomes, it's better for everyone. The patient wants that. Well, then if that the health outcome is not made in a system that works, then it has no sense. We've developed a drug for tuberculosis. We need to make sure there is health systems that can provide it. If not, this drug is not working, it's not doing anything. So again, an empowered patient is an empowered citizen, and empowered citizens should be able to make the right choices. So that is our role as an industry. We don't have any other role. We are not sitting in the steering wheel. It's the citizen who does it. And the patient is a citizen like me, like you.
I think the one thing I would add to that, though, Daniel, is I do think that industry has a role in that by committing to access, to making a tuberculosis drug available around the world, or to committing to a global humanitarian. I can see that you agree with me on that, because I think that to me is the place that I see the patient voice being the most powerful. Is they see that there will be solutions for COVID. They want to make sure that they have access to them. That pathway potentially will motivate them to make sure they have access to other therapies that maybe right now they don't.
That's great. So circling back to our closing pieces of pragmatic advice, Liz, what have you learned, and what would be your pragmatic advice to our presenter or to our audience today?
Not so much pragmatic advice, but a request. And I think we have an opportunity with a lot of congresses becoming virtual in the short term. We need patients to be able to access congresses and congress data. And we should really be encouraging organisers to let patients in through that virtual door. A lot of the previous discussions around patients shouldn't come into this because it's a promotional arena. A much easier to manage or no longer apply. And I think this is a real opportunity to break that barrier down.
So for those who couldn't quite hear Liz, she was saying that there's a real opportunity for congresses to make the virtual congress space available to patients and maybe lessen some of the concerns around what's promotional and what's not, so that patients have access to data that's shared. Kate, bringing us into home, Kate.
Pragmatic advice. I think be willing to throw spaghetti at the wall, be innovative. I think the nice thing about living in a totally uncertain time is that you are brave enough to consider any possible option. So do we really think that way of doing a clinical trial could work? Why not? Let's give it a try. And I think that approach and that bravery and that innovation is what is needed and what the patient community has been asking for, a different way of working, because I think we can all acknowledge that the model in some ways works and in some ways doesn't. And so be brave enough to be innovative and to back those solutions. I think the thing I'm taking away is don't spend on big meetings and congresses and congress bags and all the things that we all do as companies are not important and relevant to patients in the times of crisis. And so don't spend the money on the big meeting, to Liz's point, make them more accessible for more people, because you'll ultimately reach patients and help them understand what you're doing to address their needs. Invest in digital and help your patients and patient groups invest in digital. I think Zoom is really easy if you've used it. It's not so easy if you're 85 and you have arthritis and your hands don't work and it's really hard to click. or you're a mom and you've got 3 kids at home, and how on earth am I supposed to turn the background noise off to pay attention to the webinar? I think being willing to invest in digital and helping people access digital is really important and is sometimes forgotten, or the conference is being recorded. Well, does someone have a computer to watch the conference on? Do they have internet? Do they have a place to watch it? I think helping patients have those supports that they need is important. Putting closed captions on, because not everyone can hear so well. Making sure it's accessible in multiple languages. I think those are all really important things to do to reach and engage patients. And I think, Daniel, your point about being personal is one I really will take away. You know, a handwritten note, a call to say, how are you? Trying to develop a personal relationship that's not based on in-person, and being willing to make the investment in that, I think, will be really important in the future.
So we have access, we have connection and community, and we have personally reaching out and making that personal relationship stronger every day.
Yeah.
So with that, we want to thank you so much for joining us today. We want to thank the panelists for their insights and their expertise, and we hope you have a great day. Take good care.
Thank you, Gabriella.
Very much.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.